The night my sister's boyfriend laughed and called me jobless across a crowded dinner table, everyone joined in, my parents, my cousins, even my sister. What none of them knew was that the quiet girl they were mocking was the only reason that man still had a future. And within weeks, I would take it back. Stick with me. I was gripping my fork so tightly my fingers felt numb. I didn't even notice at first. The restaurant was loud, full of clinking glasses and fake smiles. It smelled like burnt garlic and cheap wine. Every laugh at the table felt sharp, like it was aimed straight at me. "So," Trent Holloway said, leaning back in his chair. He had that confident smile he always wore, like nothing could touch him. "Still figuring out what you want to do with your life, Mara?" I looked up, confused. Before I could say anything, he laughed again. "Must be nice being 30 and unemployed." For a second, everything went quiet in my head. Then the table exploded with laughter. My mom covered her mouth with her napkin, laughing like it was a cute joke. My dad shook his head and smiled, like boys will be boys. My cousins laughed because everyone else was laughing. And Lydia, my sister, just smiled. She didn't say my name. She didn't tell him to stop. She didn't even look at me. I felt my face burn, but I kept my smile in place. Years of practice helped. I nodded like he was right. Like it didn't sting. Like I deserved it. But inside, something shifted. I wasn't jobless. I hadn't failed. I had stepped back quietly, without explaining myself to anyone. I had done it for family. For Lydia. For reasons no one at that table ever bothered to ask about. Silence, I realized, makes people comfortable being cruel. Trent kept talking, enjoying the attention. He didn't know that the job he bragged about existed because of a call I once made. He didn't know the doors that opened for him were doors I unlocked and stepped away from. And Lydia didn't know that by staying silent, she had picked a side. I swallowed, took a sip of water, and let the laughter wash over me. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just watched them. Because in that moment, I saw everything clearly. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. And once you see people for who they really are, you stop protecting them. After that dinner, I couldn't sleep. The laughter kept replaying in my head, mixed with Lydia's smile. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how easy it was for them to believe I had failed. None of them had ever asked why I stepped away from my career. They just filled the silence with their own stories. Years ago, my life looked very different. I had a good job, a clear path, and plans that actually excited me. I was busy all the time, always moving, always building something. My parents were proud back then. They told people about me. Lydia used to brag about me to her friends. Then everything changed. One night, Lydia called me crying. Her voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. She was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind you don't talk about at family dinners. The kind that makes your hands tremble when you hear it. I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask what it would cost me. I just showed up. Helping her meant time, money, and energy. It meant taking days off that turned into weeks. It meant missing meetings and delaying plans. When my boss asked if I was still fully committed, I said yes, even though I knew I wasn't anymore. Eventually, I stepped back on my own. I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't explain myself. I told people I needed a break. That was easier than telling the truth. Lydia promised me it was temporary. She said once things settled, I could go back to my life. I believed her. But time passed. Her life stabilized. Mine stayed on pause. At family gatherings, no one asked how I was doing. They asked when I was going to get serious again. When I laughed it off, they took that as proof that I didn't care. My silence became their excuse. They saw me at home more often, wearing simple clothes, not rushing anywhere. They didn't see the nights I stayed awake worrying. They didn't see the emails I never sent or the opportunities one quietly let go. It was easier for them to think I failed than to imagine I chose this. What hurt the most wasn't that they misunderstood me. It was that none of them were curious enough to ask. Not once did my parents say, "What happened?" Not once did Lydia say, "Thank you." I let them believe the story they created. At the time, I thought staying quiet was protecting everyone. Now I see it clearly. My silence didn't protect me at all. There was one opportunity one never told anyone about. Not my parents. Not my friends. Not even Lydia, at least not fully. It was the kind of offer people wait years for. Good money, strong position, and a future that felt solid for the first time in my life. I remember staring at the email late at night, reading it again and again. My hands were shaking, but I was smiling. I thought, this is it. This is where everything finally starts. Then Lydia called. She was panicking. Bills were piling up. She was overwhelmed, scared, and embarrassed to ask anyone else for help. She said she just needed a little time to get back on her feet. She promised she would fix things. I didn't think twice. I told her I'd help. Helping her wasn't just about money. It was rides, phone calls, sitting with her when she cried, talking her through decisions she didn't trust herself to make. I shifted my focus without realizing how far I was stepping away from my own life. The job wanted me to relocate fast. Long hours. Full commitment. I knew I couldn't do both. So I delayed. I asked for time. Then more time. Eventually, the offer disappeared. What Lydia never knew was that the same company had connections everywhere. One of the people who interviewed me later asked if I knew anyone else who might be a good fit for a different role. Someone ambitious. Someone confident. I mentioned Trent. At the time, he was just Lydia's boyfriend. Loud, charming, always talking about how he was meant for something bigger. I thought I was helping both of them. I thought maybe this was my way of still making something good come out of my sacrifice. Trent got the meeting. Then another. Then the job. After that, things moved fast for him. Promotions. Praise. A reputation for being self-made. People loved his story. He loved telling it even more. I watched all of it from the sidelines. Quietly. I didn't remind him where it started. I didn't correct anyone when they praised his hustle. I told myself it didn't matter. That family mattered more. Lydia's life improved. That was supposed to be enough. But sitting at that dinner table, hearing Trent call me jobless like I was nothing, something inside me tightened. He was laughing at the very person who cleared his path. Lydia smiled beside him, proud of the man he'd become. Neither of them acknowledged what it cost me. I didn't expect gratitude. I didn't want praise. I just never expected to be treated like I gave up nothing at all. To everyone else, Trent was impressive. He knew how to talk, how to laugh at the right time, how to make people feel like they mattered. At family gatherings, he helped clear plates and told funny stories. My parents loved him. My cousins admired him. They said Lydia was lucky. I used to believe it too. But once I started paying attention, the cracks were impossible to ignore. In public, Trent spoke for Lydia. If someone asked her a question, he answered first. If she shared an idea, he repeated it louder, then smiled like it was his own. People nodded at him, not her. Lydia rarely noticed. Or maybe she pretended not to. When we were alone, his tone changed. He was short with her. Corrected her over small things. Told her she worried too much, that she was being dramatic. I saw her apologize for things that weren't her fault. Once, she mentioned wanting to take a short course to improve her skills. Trent laughed and said, "Why? You're fine where you are." He said it like advice, but it landed like a limit. Lydia dropped the idea and never brought it up again. He did the same thing with her friends. Slowly, quietly. He didn't forbid anything. He just made her feel silly for wanting more. What bothered me most was how he talked about his work. He told stories that weren't fully true. He exaggerated his role, skipped over help he received, and painted himself as the hero in every situation. When people praised him, he soaked it in. I sat there listening, knowing how many doors had opened because of a single introduction I made. Knowing how many calls I had smoothed over for him in the beginning. He never mentioned that part. Not once. One afternoon, I overheard him on the phone. He was frustrated, snapping at someone. When he hung up, he blamed Lydia, saying her distractions were stressing him out. She immediately said sorry, even though she hadn't said a word. That was the moment I understood. Trent didn't just like control. He needed it. He needed to feel bigger, smarter, more important than the people around him. And Lydia, desperate to keep the peace, let herself shrink. Everyone admired him because they saw the performance, not the cost. They saw confidence, not manipulation. Success, not the trail of quiet sacrifices behind it. Watching him that day, I felt something shift again. Not anger. Awareness. I realized I wasn't just invisible to Trent. I was useful. And once my usefulness was gone, he treated me like I never mattered at all. I didn't mean to hear it. If I had arrived 5 minutes later, I might have stayed blind a little longer. But I walked into the house quietly, my keys still in my hand, and their voices carried from the kitchen. Trent was laughing. "I swear, the way she just sits there," he said. "You'd think she actually did something with her life." My stomach tightened. I froze near the doorway, heart pounding. Lydia sighed. "Trent, don't." He lowered his voice, but not enough. "Come on. You know it's harmless." She never says anything. And honestly, if she didn't make that call years ago, I'd still be fine. I would have figured it out. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. So he knew. He knew exactly where his career started. He knew the help wasn't luck or coincidence. And still, he chose to laugh at me in front of everyone. Lydia spoke again, softer this time. I know. But maybe don't joke about her being jobless. She did help us back then. Us. That word hurt more than his laughter. Trent scoffed. Helped. She didn't do that much. And it's better this way. If she looks weak, people won't question why things worked out so well for me. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My ears were ringing. I wanted to walk in and confront them, to demand an explanation, to ask Lydia how she could let this happen. But I didn't. Lydia didn't argue. She didn't defend me. She didn't remind him of the nights I stayed with her, the money I gave up, the job I walked away from. She stayed quiet. And in that silence, she chose him. I stepped back slowly, my chest tight. They continued talking, switching topics like nothing important had just been said. Like my life was just a small detail. In that moment, I understood the full shape of the betrayal. It wasn't just Trent mocking me. It was knowing he did it on purpose. It was knowing Lydia was aware and still smiled across the dinner table. I had told myself before that people didn't know. That if they understood, they would act differently. That belief had protected me. Now it shattered. They didn't misunderstand me. They minimized me. Trent built himself up by making me small. Lydia allowed it because peace was easier than honesty. I walked out without a sound. No tears. No shaking. Just a quiet resolve settling in my chest. If they could use my silence against me, then I would stop being silent. And this time, I wouldn't warn them first. After that night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream into a pillow or replay the words again and again. I felt calm in a way that surprised me. The kind of calm that comes when a decision is already made. I knew confronting them would change nothing. Trent would deny it or twist the story. Lydia would apologize softly and ask me to understand. I had done enough understanding. So I stayed quiet, just not in the way they expected. I started by pulling back from the small things no one noticed. I stopped answering calls that weren't urgent. I delayed responses. I let conversations end instead of filling the silence. No explanations. No drama. Then I moved to the bigger things. There were people I had introduced Trent to early on. Mentors. Contacts. People who trusted my judgment. I had always smoothed things over for him, explained his rough edges, made excuses when he dropped the ball. I stopped doing that. When someone asked me about him, I kept my answers short and honest. No praise. No protection. Just facts. I quietly stepped away from projects I had helped guide from the background. I removed my name from shared documents. I let others see the gaps I used to cover. Nothing I did was aggressive. I didn't lie or sabotage. I simply took back what was mine. It felt strange at first. Almost wrong. Like I was being selfish. That feeling came from years of putting everyone else first. I had to remind myself that protecting my work wasn't cruelty. Meanwhile, Trent grew restless. I could sense it in his tone when we spoke. He was sharper, more impatient. Things that used to move easily now stalled. People took longer to reply. Meetings got postponed. He didn't connect it to me. Why would he? In his mind, I was still the quiet sister-in-law with nothing going on. Lydia noticed the tension. She asked if something was wrong. I told her I was focusing on myself. That was the truth. Every step I took felt small on its own. But together, they formed distance. Space. Freedom. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life again. Not by fighting. Not by demanding credit. By walking away from the role they assigned me. They thought my silence meant weakness. They never realized it was effort. Now that effort was gone. And without it, everything they took for granted started to feel heavier. I didn't announce my decision. I didn't give warnings. I just stopped holding them up. And I waited. The changes didn't happen all at once. At first, they were small enough to ignore. A meeting that got pushed back. A call that went straight to voicemail. Trent brushed it off, saying people were busy. But I noticed. He started complaining more. His voice carried tension now, sharp around the edges. He talked about bad timing, about how people didn't respect effort anymore. I listened quietly, the same way I always had. Soon, the delays turned into real problems. A project he was sure he had locked and suddenly went quiet. A promotion he hinted at never came. He checked his phone constantly, refreshing his email like answers might appear if he stared hard enough. At family dinners, he still smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He talked louder, laughed harder, like he was trying to convince himself as much as everyone else. "I don't get it," he said one evening. Things were moving so fast before. No one responded. They nodded sympathetically, offered empty encouragement. Lydia squeezed his hand, worried. I said nothing. Behind the scenes, things were simply unfolding without me. When people reached out for context or guidance, I wasn't there to smooth the path. When questions came up about his reliability, there was no one rushing to explain it away. For the first time, Trent had to stand on his own. And cracks showed. He missed details. He overpromised. He grew defensive when challenged. Without someone quietly correcting his mistakes, they stayed visible. One afternoon, I overheard him arguing on the phone. He paced the room, voice raised, blaming others for not understanding his vision. When he hung up, he threw his phone on the couch and muttered about people being ungrateful. Lydia tried to calm him. He snapped at her, then apologized, then snapped again. The man everyone admired was unraveling under pressure. Not because anyone attacked him, but because no one was catching him anymore. At another gathering, someone asked about a project he had bragged about months earlier. Trent hesitated. The story changed halfway through. A few people exchanged looks. I saw it then. The first real shift. Doubt. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was there. Trent sensed it too. He became tense around me, though he didn't know why. Sometimes he looked at me like he was searching for something he'd lost. But he never connected the dots. In his mind, I was still invisible. Still harmless. Still irrelevant. He didn't realize that what he called bad luck was simply life without my quiet support. And once that support was gone, the image he worked so hard to maintain began to crumble on its own. It was a Sunday afternoon when everyone came over for brunch. I had expected the usual chatter, the easy laughter, the way Trent always took center stage. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. People were gathered around the table, sipping coffee, sharing stories. Trent was telling one of his proud "look what I did" stories, embellishing the details, smiling at the nods he got from my parents. Lydia sat beside him, proud and unaware of what was about to happen. I took a deep breath. I didn't storm in yelling or confront anyone angrily. I just spoke softly at first. "You know," I said, "there's something I've never shared in front of everyone." Trent raised an eyebrow. Lydia looked curious but cautious. The room quieted. "I wasn't jobless at 30, I continued. I stepped back from a career I worked hard for, a career I loved, to help someone who needed me. I made sacrifices you never asked about, and I didn't tell you because I thought family came first." Heads turned. My parents blinked. My cousin stopped mid-laugh. Trent shifted uncomfortably, pretending to be casual but failing. "What you also don't know," I said, looking at him, "is that the career you brag about, the opportunities you claim as your own, started because of a call I made years ago. I introduced you to people, smoothed paths, covered mistakes, and gave you chances you didn't earn." The silence hit like a wave. Trent's face went pale. Lydia's mouth opened, closed, and then she looked away. My parents didn't know where to look. I didn't shout. I didn't demand applause or acknowledgement. I simply laid out the truth. Quietly, calmly. "And while you mocked me at the table," I said, "you were laughing at the person who helped you build what you have now." The room stayed silent. Not a word. The weight of what I said settled in. For the first time, people weren't laughing or distracted. They were listening. Really listening. I looked at Trent. His confidence faltered. He couldn't charm his way out of it. I looked at Lydia. She realized her silence had consequences. I smiled faintly. I didn't need revenge to feel powerful. Seeing the truth recognized, seeing the people who underestimated me pause and consider, was enough. For the first time, the story wasn't theirs to tell. It was mine, and they had no choice but to hear it. It didn't happen all at once, but the shift was noticeable. The air around Trent changed. People no longer hung on his every word. When he tried to charm the room, the smiles were polite, not admiring. Lydia was the first to break the silence in her own way. She pulled me aside one evening, away from the others. Her eyes were watery, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her cup. I didn't realize," she said quietly. "I should have said something sooner. I should have defended you." I listened, saying nothing at first. The words felt late, too late. Years of silence, of watching her smile while I was mocked, had left a mark. I thought staying quiet would keep the peace, she continued. I thought it would make things easier. But I see now. I hurt you. I let him hurt you. And I didn't stop it. Her confession didn't erase the past, but it made the truth even clearer. Trent could no longer hide behind charm or excuses. He tried to argue his way out of it, of course. I didn't know what I was doing, he said to my parents during one brunch. I wasn't trying to, but the timing betrayed him. People remembered the dinners, the jokes, the way Mara never explained herself. They remembered the quiet sacrifice no one had asked about. The evidence of his reliance on her, all those years ago, was finally obvious. His confidence faltered. He tried to regain it with a joke, a story, a loud laugh, but no one responded the way they used to. He fumbled over details of projects he had claimed as his own, and someone finally asked questions he couldn't answer without sounding defensive. Lydia watched him too. There was shame on her face, regret in her voice, and a realization that she had been part of the problem. My parents shifted their attention toward me, asking questions about my work, my choices, the life I had quietly built. The respect they had overlooked for years came forward naturally, without me demanding it. And Trent, who once stood at the center of every room, now looked smaller. His confidence crumbled, piece by piece, under the weight of truth. I didn't gloat. I didn't laugh at him. I simply watched. Because finally, the people who had underestimated me saw the full picture. And the apologies, when they came, were sincere but far too late to change what had already been done. The respect and recognition I had quietly earned could never be taken back. I had waited long enough. And now it was mine. After all the dinners, the explanations, and the silent watching, I realized revenge didn't need fireworks. I didn't need to yell or make a scene. The kind of revenge that lasts isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, and unshakable. I started by focusing entirely on myself. Projects I had set aside, opportunities one had ignored, I returned to them. Slowly, deliberately. I invested in my skills, my career, my happiness. Each small step reminded me of my own worth, the part no one had ever recognized. Trent noticed, of course. He tried to insert himself into conversations, to charm people back, to regain the energy he once commanded so easily. But it didn't work. Without me smoothing the edges, correcting the small mistakes, and opening doors for him, he began to stumble. The confidence he wore like armor cracked. People stopped returning his calls. Meetings he assumed would be easy suddenly required effort he hadn't prepared for. I didn't intervene. I didn't point it out. I simply let life unfold. It was enough to see him struggling quietly while I moved forward. Lydia came to me a few times, apologizing again. Her voice carried guilt this time, not just regret. I listened. I accepted that she was learning too late the consequences of staying silent. But I didn't let her pull me back into the past. Her lessons were hers to carry. My parents began noticing the changes as well. They saw my calm confidence, the clarity in my decisions, the way I no longer allowed anyone to define my worth. They asked questions, sought advice, and for the first time truly listened. Respect, I realized, isn't demanded. It's recognized when people witness consistency and strength. I didn't gloat. I didn't look for revenge like a trophy to wave. I simply lived my life, full and forward-moving, with dignity intact. The quiet satisfaction came from knowing I no longer carried the burden of protecting someone who never appreciated it. Trent's charm faded, because it had always relied on me being in the background. Without my support, he was exposed as the man I had always known him to be, dependent, controlling, and unprepared to stand on his own. I smiled one evening, thinking about how simple it had been. Nothing dramatic, nothing public, just life rearranging itself naturally. Lydia faced the cost of her silence. Trent lost the support he never deserved, and I, finally, was free. The quiet kind of revenge, I realized, was also the most powerful. It didn't need an audience. It didn't need approval. It simply worked. If you've ever been overlooked or taken for granted, remember, your worth isn't defined by others. Stand up for yourself quietly, focus on your growth, and reclaim your life. Small, consistent steps build respect, independence, and confidence, the strongest form of personal empowerment that lasts a lifetime.